Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Your Honor. We would ask the court to ask Dr. Elizabeth Laposata to join us.
Okay.
And you're going to step up, face the clerk, and raise your right hand, please.
You solemnly swear the evidence you give to the court and jury in the case now and hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
I do.
Good afternoon, Doctor.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
May I inquire?
Yes, and Dr. Laposata, please speak right into that microphone, okay?
I will.
Thank you.
Doctor, can you please state your full name and spell your last name for the jurors?
Yes, Dr. Elizabeth Laposata, spelled Laposata.
I'm going to ask you, you have a softer voice. I'm going to ask you to pull that microphone right under your chin, if you don't mind. It's pretty adjustable.
Okay. Better?
That's better.
Okay.
That's better. Doctor, can you tell the jurors what you do for a living?
Yes, I'm a medical doctor, and I subspecialize in forensic pathology.
Can you summarize your professional background?
Certainly, I graduated in 1975 from Bucknell University with a Bachelor of Science in Biology. I went to University of Maryland School of Medicine, where I graduated in 1979 with a Doctor of Medicine. I did my internship and fellowship at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, where I studied anatomic pathology, which is the study of the diseases of the body. I then did my subspecialty fellowship in St. Louis in forensic pathology, which is understanding causes of death and injuries to the body.
Currently, are you a professor?
Yes, I am.
And tell us where you work.
I own my own independent consulting practice, and I'm also an associate professor at Brown University School of Medicine.
How long have you taught at Brown University School of Medicine?
Since 1993.
And how long have you been a clinical associate professor of pathology either at Brown or before that?
Oh, gee, then that would have been since at least in the late 80s. I've been associate professors at the universities and medical schools where I've worked.
Doctor, at Brown University, let's take Brown first. What do you teach there?
I teach the second-year medical students. I teach a lecture in diseases of the heart, cardiomyopathy, and myocarditis. And I've been asked to give some specialized lectures in toxicology and forensic pathology.
Are you responsible for training medical students in the field of forensic pathology?
When I was a chief medical examiner, yes, we would have medical students, residents, come into the office so they could learn about what we do to understand cause and circumstances of death.
When you first got your medical license, did you then undertake to get certain board certifications and the like?
Yes.
Before we get to those board certifications, did you begin a practice in forensic pathology in some way or another?
After I finished my medical school and my anatomic fellowships and forensic pathology fellowships, then I was working in medical examiners' offices where I was examining deceased people to understand how they died.
When you get a medical license, is that statewide or is it nationwide?
Usually you get a state medical license.
And do you hold a state medical license?
Yes.
How many?
I have an active medical license in Rhode Island where I have my consulting practice, and I have inactive license in Maryland, Delaware, Missouri, Pennsylvania.
And you've been previously, at least before they were inactive, you were licensed in all 5 of those states?
Yes.
You already told us a little bit about your college. Did you mention Bucknell University? Your Bachelor of Science degree?
I think I did, yes.
At some point after you graduated from the University of Maryland School of Medicine, did you complete any residencies?
Yes, I did my residency at, excuse me, at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore in anatomic pathology.
Forensic pathology is different from anatomic pathology, correct?
Yes.
Did you also do any kind of residency in forensic pathology?
Yes, I did a fellowship in forensic pathology.
And what is the difference between, if you can sort of take us through that little by little, what is the difference between forensic pathology and anatomic pathology?
Anatomic pathology is sort of hospital-based pathology where we understand diseases of patients who are in the hospital and try to make clinical pathologic correlations to see if their diagnoses were correct, if the laboratory tests actually showed what we find at post-mortem. And then forensic pathology deals more with understanding why the body stops functioning at a particular time. So that would be cause of death, and that can be sudden unexpected death or death due to violence.
And in forensic pathology, is that often associated with testimony in court cases that may deal with either on the civil side or the criminal side, coming in and testifying about things like cause of death and manner of death?
Yes.
What types of cases did you work on during your forensic pathology residency?
Oh, sudden unexpected natural death, gunshot wounds, knife wounds, sudden infant deaths, blunt force trauma, skeletonized remains, decomposed bodies, strangulation, the whole gamut of ways people can die unnaturally.
And what type, to contrast that, what types of cases did you work on during your anatomic pathology residency?
There you're mainly dealing with natural diseases and understanding heart disease or how somebody gets pneumonia, or looking at the brain to understand if a stroke was present. And that's especially important then to the doctors who are treating those patients, that they can see if the diagnostic tests were appropriate or if their treatments worked.
You mentioned fellowship a little earlier in your testimony. What is a fellowship?
A fellowship is after you've done your internship and residency. A fellowship is more specialized training, and I did that in forensic pathology.
So that answers my next question. You do hold a postgraduate fellowship position, correct?
Yes, yes.
And that was in forensic pathology specifically?
I'm board certified in anatomic and forensic pathology.
Were you a research associate at the Department of Pathology and Laboratory Medicine at University of Pennsylvania School of Law?
Yes.
I'm sorry, School of Medicine?
Yes.
Old habits. What about postdoctoral research fellow? Were you ever a postdoctoral research fellow?
Yes, I did. I had an NIH research grant where I worked on, excuse me, how alcohol affects the heart.
Where was that?
That was at St. Louis University, and then when I was on staff at the hospital of the University of Pennsylvania.
What about postdoctoral research fellow at dealing with the cardiovascular division of the Department of Medicine at Washington University?
Yes, that's where I did research on how alcohol affects the heart.
Was all this in furtherance of your broad education and training as a pathologist?
Yes.
I think you indicated that you have served as a chief medical examiner in answering one of the previous questions. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, I was appointed chief medical examiner for the state of Rhode Island in 1993, where I was responsible for all unexpected, unnatural deaths or deaths that involve violence in the state of Rhode Island. So I had to supervise the office, made sure I have adequate staff, made sure my forensic pathology staff were doing a good job, made sure I had an adequate scene investigative staff. So running the whole office.
Is that the highest appointment in the OCME's office?
Yes, it is.
In that position, did you oversee every single medical examiner in the state of Rhode Island?
Yes.
Did you also hold a position as the co-chair of Child Fatality Review Committee in the state of Rhode Island?
Yes, as part of being chief medical examiner.
Tell us a little bit about that. What was that appointment?
Well, there's a big concern about infants who die and children who die. So those are reviewed specifically by a group of doctors from the pediatricians and also then the medical examiner's office. So we look at every child and infant death.
How long did you serve as the chief medical examiner in the state of Rhode Island?
For 12 years.
Starting when and ending when?
Starting in 1993 and ending in 2005.
As the chief medical examiner for Rhode Island, did you ever have the responsibility to work on any mass disaster cases?
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay, tell us a little bit about that. If you could start with the Egypt Air issue.
Yes. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. In 1999, the Egypt Air 990 took off from New York airport, and it crashed off the coast of Massachusetts, and 2,065 passengers died. And because of the force of the airplane going into the water, all the bodies were fragmented. So all the fragments were brought to my medical examiner's office. They actually vacuumed the ocean floor, and we had 2,600 some fragmented remains from that airplane crash, and that involved working with FBI, TSA to identify those individuals and understand exactly why they died.
What was your role and the role of your staff that you supervised in dealing with those other government agencies, the FBI, the NTSA, other entities, in terms of the fatalities that you did review as a medical examiner or the chief medical examiner of Rhode Island?
Well, I dealt with families from around the globe who had relatives on that flight, and then the FBI was looking into what may have caused the crash. The Egyptian government, who owned the airplane, was also there and interested in understanding what happened. And we were also, tasked with identifying everybody who was on the plane and to see if that matched the passenger manifest list. So were there people on the plane who shouldn't have been on the plane? So that sort of thing.
In terms of matching that manifest, were you the head of the department for the medical examiner's office that was responsible for trying to figure out who was on the plane and match those remains with the individuals that were on the manifest?
Yes, we made the positive forensic identifications and returned the fragmented human remains to their families.
Doctor, did you also deal with the tragic station nightclub fire?
Yes.
In what capacity did you deal with that?
Again, this was a nightclub that burned down. It burned down very rapidly with a very hot fire, and that was in Rhode Island, and there were 100 fatalities from that. So those come to the medical examiner's office. I had my investigator at the scene throughout that time of recovering the bodies, and I was charged with determining the identity and the cause of death.
Were you successful, or your staff successful, in determining the identity of most of those individuals who perished?
Yes, all of them. We worked around the clock for 3 days to get that done.
And you were the head of that task force. Before you became the chief medical examiner in Rhode Island, did you previously work as a medical examiner under somebody else?
Yes.
Tell me about that. What was your first post as a assistant medical examiner?
My first post was after I did my fellowship training in St. Louis, Missouri. I was an assistant medical examiner for the city of St. Louis.
Were you ever an assistant medical examiner in Philadelphia?
Yes. So after St. Louis, I moved to Philadelphia, where I was on staff at the hospital of the University of Pennsylvania, and I ran the autopsy service there at the hospital, and I was also an assistant medical examiner for the city of Philadelphia. After that, I was an assistant medical examiner for the state of Delaware, and then I came to Rhode Island as I was chosen to be chief.
Dr. Laposata, can we put dates on that? Assistant medical examiner in St. Louis, from when to when? Do you remember?
Oh, my. Let's see. May I look at my CV?
Sure. With the court's permission.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, from 1983 to 85, I was an assistant medical examiner for the city of St. Louis. Then in 87 to 91, I was the assistant medical examiner for the city of Philadelphia. 91 to 93, assistant medical examiner for the state of Delaware. And then 1993 to 2005, I was chief medical examiner for the state of Rhode Island.
Thank you for that. Dr. Laposata, have you held any faculty positions as in the field of forensic pathology that qualify you as an expert in this case?
Yes. Every medical examiner's office I worked in, I also had faculty appointments to teach medical students and pathology residents. So I had faculty appointments at Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis, at the Hospital University of Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, and in Rhode Island.
Let's talk about those one at a time. Describe your teaching responsibilities at Brown Medical School, if you wouldn't mind. And that, by the way, that's from 1994 to present, correct?
93 to well, as a medical examiner, it was 1993 to 2005, and there I would teach the medical students. We had rotations through the medical examiner's office, and also the pathology residents would rotate through the medical examiner's office, where I would teach them how to do a medical legal autopsy, how to understand cause and manner of death, especially non-natural and traumatic deaths.
With regard to your teaching responsibilities specifically, are you still teaching?
I'm teaching in the cardiovascular section now, but since I'm not chief of the medical examiner's office, I obviously don't have students rotating through there anymore.
Were you a lecturer in the role of medical examiner? Did you do a seminar in that regard at or associated with Brown University School of Medicine?
Yes.
Did you do some sort of a forensic pathology rotation for pathology residents from 1994 to 1995 in that capacity as well?
Yes, we would have the pathology residents who were at the hospital studying anatomic pathology come to the medical examiner's office so they could understand the discipline of forensic pathology.
What is cardiomyopathy?
Cardiomyopathy is a muscular disease of the muscles of the heart.
And what is myocarditis?
Inflammation of the heart muscle.
Did you ever teach or lecture on those issues?
Yes, I teach every year. I teach the second-year medical students about those heart diseases.
Have you ever taught anatomy and physiology to EMTs?
Yes.
Or in the EMT setting?
Yes.
And what about a class known as the 2-hour primer on forensic pathology?
I've taught a lot. I don't recall that particular.
How about pathology residents morning conference in 2009?
Oh, yes. I give lectures to the pathology residents at the medical school at Brown Medical School in forensic pathology.
You also mentioned that you were an adjunct professor for biomedical forensic sciences and forensic anthropology in the Department of Anatomy and Neurology. Is that a division of the graduate school, Boston University School of Medicine?
Yes, I taught in the master's program in the medical school at Boston University School of Medicine for a master's in forensic science, where I taught a 40-hour course on forensic pathology and another 40-hour course on medical legal death investigation.
Were you actually the course director in that position?
Yes.
And were you also a course director in medical legal death investigation from 2006 to 2013?
Yes.
And what about a course director in forensic toxicology from 2006 to 2012?
Correct.
Did you direct the studies in biomedical forensic sciences, GMS, from 2012 to present?
Yes.
Describe that. What is that?
The graduate medical sciences?
Correct.
Okay, yeah, I would review and be on the board to examine projects that the students were doing to get a master's degree.
Were you also an assistant professor in the Department of Pathology and Laboratory Medicine at University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine?
Yes.
Okay. Without going into every single class that you taught, did you teach from 1987 to 1991, attending staff medical pathology.
Yes.
What is that? Just a general outline of what that teaching course was.
That's when I was at the hospital, the University of Pennsylvania. I ran the autopsy service, so I taught medical students and pathology residents about autopsy practice.
I want to ask you sort of broadly, can you describe your major teaching and clinical responsibilities when you were at University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine in the field of forensic pathology? What were your main clinical and teaching positions?
Well, I ran the autopsy service there, so I taught the medical residents and medical students autopsy pathology, and I was also a assistant medical examiner there, so I taught and started the forensic fellowship in forensic pathology.
Have you ever been qualified as an expert witness in forensic and anatomic pathology in state and federal courts?
Yes.
How many times would you say you've qualified as an expert?
Over 40 years, maybe several hundred.
How about in Massachusetts?
That includes all of them.
Okay. Have you ever qualified? Let me list a couple of states. In Massachusetts?
Yes.
California?
Yes.
Connecticut?
Yes.
Delaware?
Yes.
Florida?
Yes.
Illinois?
Yes.
Maryland?
Yes.
Minnesota?
Yes.
Missouri?
Yes.
New York?
Yes.
Pennsylvania?
Yes.
Rhode Island?
Rhode Island, yes.
Have I left anything out? That's
Did you
just
say
about all.
Massachusetts?
I did.
Okay, then
We
you're
started
fine.
with Massachusetts.
Okay, you're fine.
What types of topics have you qualified to testify about as an expert forensic and anatomic pathologist?
Really, anything that has to do with circumstances and cause of death. So it doesn't really matter, what type of injury or a sudden unexpected death. Usually it involves examination, study of information from the scene, information from the autopsy, police and investigation and medical records, and we put that all together and figure out the circumstances as to how someone died and why their body stopped functioning. So that's the basis of forensic pathology.
Dr. Williams, excuse me for just a second. You want to maybe approach for one brief.
send you back. I'm going to keep you here for 2 minutes. Dr. Laposata, I'm
Yes.
going to ask you to step down and you can go back to the court officer into that back room.
Okay, certainly.
And jurors, rather than send you downstairs and back up the stairs to come back in 5 minutes, we're just going to, I'm going to sit here, you all can sit here, we're just going to be in recess for 5 minutes while we sit. Feel free to stand up and stretch if you want to. Do whatever you want for 5 minutes. You can have a seat here. Thank you.
May I inquire?
Yes.
Thank you. Dr. Laposata, you mentioned several topics about which you testified and qualified as an expert. Testified about it as an expert in several different states, several different courtrooms. Have you been qualified as an expert by those courts in those topics about which you just discussed?
Yes.
Do you hold any specialty certifications in the field of forensic pathology?
Well, I'm board certified in forensic pathology.
What about the American Board of Pathology?
Yes, the American Board of Pathology puts forth examinations that are a 2-day examination in the various disciplines of pathology, and if you successfully complete those examinations, then you become a diplomat of the American Board of Pathology in whichever subspecialty you're in, and I became a diplomat in the subspecialty of anatomic and forensic pathology.
What about a certification in basic bloodstain pattern analysis, the International Association of Identification?
Yes, I had a week-long course in understanding blood pattern analysis.
Can you tell us a little bit about the National Registry Emergency Medical Technician certification that you hold?
Yes, I took training to become an EMT.
Have you received a number of honors and awards in the field of forensic pathology?
I have.
What do those awards include?
May I look at my CV again?
Sure.
Thank you. I had teaching awards from Brown University School of Medicine. I was featured in a book by Faces of Public Health as having run a good medical examiner's office. I was nominated for Woman of the Year in Rhode Island for my work as chief medical examiner in improving the office and handling those 2 mass disasters. I was honored by Victims' Rights and Services Awards because I've always been aware of the fact that as a forensic pathologist, I am the last doctor this person is going to have, so I try to help the family understand what happened. I was honored for my work in the mass disaster in Egypt Air 990 plane crash. Let's see. I was Outstanding Woman in Public Service for Providence, Rhode Island. I've gotten teaching awards from Brown University School of Medicine. I was elected to the Board of Trustees in the Delaware SIDS Foundation and the Philadelphia SIDS Foundation. And then we're back to my medical school.
If you could pull the microphone a little closer to your chin.
It's very hard because the chair doesn't push in enough.
Oh, the chair doesn't move. Okay.
Oh, I got it. I moved.
We'll make do.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Laposata. What is the American Academy of Forensic Sciences?
That's one of our medical associations that is specific to forensic sciences.
Have you ever held a chaired position there?
Yes.
What position was that?
I was voted into a fellowship position.
Were you the chairman of Forensic Science Research, the Forensic Science Research Committee?
Yes.
What's the National Association of Medical Examiners?
It's also called NAME. It's another international association of forensic pathologists.
Were you a member of that organization?
Yes.
And at some point, did you get elected to the board of directors for that organization?
Yes.
And ultimately, did you become a fellow for that organization?
I did.
What is the American Society of Clinical Pathologists?
That's a society that is for people who practice anatomic pathology and understand how to interpret laboratory results and biopsies.
Did you become a fellow in 1991 until present for that organization?
Yes.
What's the difference between a member and a fellow?
A member is a lower level, and then you can be promoted to fellow if the board of directors feels that you've contributed in your field.
And were you associated with the College of American Pathologists?
Yes.
Were you a fellow there as well?
Yes.
What about the World Association for Medical Law?
Yes.
What about the American Association for Clinical Chemistry?
Yes, I'm a member.
Rhode Island Medical Women's Association, what is that?
Well, it's basically what it says. It's women doctors in Rhode Island.
Were you elected to the board of directors for that organization?
Yes,
Ultimately, were you elected as the president of that organization?
I was.
Rhode Island Medical Society, what is that?
It's an organization of doctors who practice in Rhode Island.
Are you a council member there?
Yes.
And what about the Massachusetts Medical Legal Society?
Yes, I was a member there. They have disbanded since.
It doesn't exist anymore?
No.
When it was up and running, you were a member in good standing?
Yes.
Good, good. Pennsylvania Association of Pathologists, what about that?
Yes, when I practiced in Pennsylvania, I was a member of that organization.
Did you, in addition to be a member there, did you also hold a chaired position? Were you the chairman for the Committee on Forensic Pathology?
Yes.
Have you served on any editorial boards of any scholarly journals or
Yes.
publications? Tell me about that.
I've reviewed articles submitted for the Journal of Forensic Sciences and the National Association of Medical Examiner Journals.
Did you also hold an editorial position for the American Journal of Forensic Medicine and Pathology?
Yes.
Is that one of the medical journals that is used throughout the country by other medical professionals, other medical examiners?
Yes.
It's a resource?
Yes.
And a text?
Correct.
Have you authored any peer-reviewed publications in the field of forensic pathology?
Yes, I have.
Can you tell us about some of those publications?
Let's see if I can here. Yeah, I've written chapters in textbooks about medical legal death investigation and forensic pathology. I've published articles involving alcohol metabolism, some drugs, cocaine. Let's see. Alcohol metabolism in the heart, I mentioned. Let's see. And so I've published 22 papers, and I've written several chapters.
You already said that you're board certified, double board certified in anatomic and forensic pathology. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now that you've gone through your education, training, background, publications, teaching positions, and chairs that you've held, I want to ask you a really simple question. What does a forensic pathologist do?
Yeah. We are the last doctor that the dead person has, and we figure out what happened to the body to cause their death. And we sign the death certificate that says how the body came to die and also indicates the circumstances under which the death occurred.
Are medical examiners also tasked with determining both manner and cause, not just one or the other?
Both, yes.
What is the manner of death, and how is it distinguished from the cause of death?
The cause of death is what happens to the body to cause it to stop functioning. And the manner of death refers to circumstances under which the death occurred. So there's hundreds of thousands of causes of death for why the body stops functioning, but there's only a few manners of death, which would be natural, accident, suicide, homicide, or undetermined.
Those 5 main categories of manner of death, is that the responsibility or one of the responsibilities of a forensic medical examiner to determine that the death fits into one of those 5 categories?
Correct.
What does it mean when the death is deemed undetermined?
When the manner of death is undetermined, that means at the time the death certificate was signed, there was not enough information to put it into either accident, natural, suicide, or homicide. So at the time the death certificate was signed, there was not enough information to put it into one of those other categories. It doesn't mean that if more investigation takes place, then you might be able to put it in one of those other categories.
If a manner of death is deemed at a particular time undetermined, at that time, it's because it lacks sufficient additional information. Is that correct?
Objection.
What types of information does a medical examiner, a forensic pathologist consider in making these determinations between natural, accident, homicide, suicide, undetermined?
Well, first you have the findings from the examination of the body. So that's sort of a starting place to see what happened to the body. Then you need to also look at the scene investigation. You need to look at any police reports and witness statements, and also medical history of the deceased. And using those 4 sources of information and using your training and experience, you can either say this is a natural death, this is a self-inflicted death, it's a suicide, it's an accidental death, it's a homicide, or if all that information doesn't allow you to put to a reasonable degree of medical certainty into any one of those categories, then you have to leave the manner undetermined. And if more information becomes available later, then you can change that death certificate.
What if no more information comes available later?
It just stays as undetermined. There are cases where there's just not enough information to put it in one of those other categories.
Without getting into what they may be, did you reach any opinions and conclusions in connection with this case?
Yes.
What materials and information did you consider in reaching your opinions and conclusions in this particular case?
Yes. I have my list of materials I reviewed. I reviewed Mr. O'Keefe's autopsy report, the report of the examination of his brain, the toxicology report, and the entire medical examiner file. I studied 100 and some autopsy photos, including photographs of the brain, and then there were 70 other photographs at autopsy taken by a state trooper who was at the examination. I reviewed Mr. O'Keefe's medical records from Good Samaritan Medical Center and the EMS run sheet. I reviewed photographs of Mr. O'Keefe's clothes that were taken at the crime lab. I reviewed photographs of pieces of tail light, hard plastic, clear, black, red. I reviewed photographs of the outside of Karen Reed's SUV. I reviewed the Canton Police Department incident report on the death. I reviewed 100 and some photographs taken by Canton Police of the outside of the house at 34 Fairview Road in Canton. I reviewed some photographs taken by the real estate agent who was going to sell the house of the inside.
In total, putting them in categories, did you review the forensic autopsy?
Yes.
Did you review all of the files associated with the medical examiner's office in this particular case related to the autopsy of John O'Keefe?
Yes.
Did you review the scene investigation through police reports and other things?
Yes.
Photographs as well?
Yes.
Did you review the police reports that were associated with the initial investigation in this case as well as follow-ups?
Yes.
Did you review witness statements and things of that sort?
Yes, if they were included in the police report.
That was my next question. Those witness statements would be included in the police reports that you otherwise reviewed, correct?
Yes.
What about Mr. O'Keefe's medical history as much as you had of it?
Yes, I reviewed his medical history.
And what about hospital records?
His medical history was in the hospital records.
Understood. What method did you use or methodology did you use in forming the opinion that we'll get to in just a few minutes?
Well, in order to arrive at a conclusion of how somebody dies and what the cause of death is, we have to put all our facts out. And then we say, how could these facts have come to be? So it's called like a differential diagnosis. So like if you go to your doctor and you have a white blood cell count, then the doctor would say, well, how many ways do you get this white blood cell count? So that's a differential diagnosis. And then you go from that list and pare it down by getting more data till you come to one final diagnosis. So that's the process of determining how somebody dies and the circumstance around it.
Is it fair to say that you have a pretty significant background, training, and experience regarding coming to the conclusion of cause and manner of death?
40 plus years.
And how many autopsies in total?
Well, myself, I've probably done over 3,000, and then I have observed and reviewed maybe 7,000 more.
So that's in total over 10,000 autopsies if you were to estimate over 40 years?
Probably.
In addition to just autopsies, how many death investigations, separate and apart from autopsies, have you been involved with?
Well, the autopsy usually has a corresponding death investigation with it.
Do you have experience in examining and identifying wounds, not necessarily the cause and manner of death, but wounds that are associated with someone on whom you're performing an autopsy or you're supervising an autopsy?
Yes, so looking at the injuries on the body and understanding what caused them is a huge part of forensic pathology.
Have you ever conducted or overseen any autopsies of individuals involved in vehicle-pedestrian collisions?
Yes.
How many times, if you had to estimate?
No, hundreds.
100 or hundreds?
Hundreds.
When was it that you first started training on the issue of wound pattern recognition that helps assist you with coming to your conclusions, whether it be auto pedestrian incidents or otherwise?
Yeah, well, understanding wound patterns and injuries is a big part of forensic pathology because we want to identify what caused a particular pattern. So understanding that whole complex bag of injuries begins when you start your forensic pathology training, which was when I started back in '81.
In addition to the cause of death, which might be a gunshot, something, does the pathologist also undertake an examination of the rest of the body that's not so obvious, other wounds, etc., that might tell a more defined story?
Yes, we look at the entire body, we look at the clothing, we look at the outside of the body, then we do the internal examination in order to understand not only why the body stopped functioning, which is the cause of death, but also things that could have contributed to it or helped to understand the circumstances around how that death occurred.
When you say the body, you mentioned the clothing. Why is the clothing important? Is that part of the body for a forensic medical examiner?
Oh, yes, it is. You always have to look at the clothing because it has materials on it that may be important as to how injuries occurred. So it's every time you do an autopsy, you have to always make sure you have the clothing. Many times it would have been taken off at the hospital, but then I would always ask my staff, tell the police, we've got to get the clothes, have to look at the clothes.
What is a gross examination?
A gross examination is not actually like gross, grotesque, but it means like without microscopes. It means just looking with your naked eye.
Is it important to look at a body, a deceased person, when you're conducting an autopsy from head to toe for outside obvious wounds that you can see on the gross anatomy outside?
Oh, yes, and also to collect any trace evidence that may be present on the body.
Are forensic medical examiners trained to do that?
Oh, yes.
Are you trained to do that?
Absolutely.
In addition to a gross examination on the outside of the body, is it also important to look on the inside of the body?
Yes.
Are there wounds and injuries that might be hidden by the dermis, for instance, the skin, that might not be so obvious on a gross examination of a body?
Yes, you have to look inside the body.
And what's the mechanism of doing that?
Excuse me. We make surgical incisions in the body so we can examine the brain, the neck, all the organs in the chest, all the organs in the abdomen, and depending on the case, we may make incisions in the arms and legs to look for evidence of injuries.
What about x-rays? Are x-rays an important part of an examination in an autopsy?
Yes, they're usually done before the autopsy is started, and we look for changes in the bones or any foreign material that might be present in the body, like a bullet.
Dr. Laposata, have you ever exercised wound pattern recognition in your position as a forensic pathologist? Or do you do it every time?
Oh, all the time.
Have you ever taught any courses or given lectures on wound identification and wound pattern recognition?
Yes, it's part of understanding blunt force trauma, sharp force trauma, gunshot wounds. They all make injury patterns on the body that the pathologist can then relate to what caused that injury.
With regard to the case that's before us, what injuries did you observe with regard to Mr. O'Keefe's head, specifically?
I observed that he had evidence of blunt force trauma to the back of his head.
Are those injuries consistent with a particular type or pattern of patterned injury?
Yes.
Describe that for us, please.
There in the back of his head, a little bit to the right-hand side, was a horizontal tearing of the scalp, and that's called a laceration. And surrounding that were linear scrapes that were vertical in orientation. So that is an injury pattern. And then you have to think, well, what could cause that injury pattern? And so then you go from there.
Did you also, in addition to looking at, by the way, how did you make that assessment about the injury? Was it photographs?
Yes.
Is that a normal way for a forensic pathologist to make an assessment? Is that an acceptable methodology to make an assessment of a wound pattern by the use of anatomical photographs?
Oh, absolutely.
Have you done it before?
Oh, hundreds of times.
What is a coup contra coup injury?
Now, it's a very interesting, peculiar injury to the head. When you have a blow to the head, the blow can either be the stationary head and there's a blow to it, or you can have the head that's moving and gets the blow. So looking at a pattern of coup contra coup helps the forensic pathologist differentiate that. A coup contra coup injury examines the coup, which is where the impact occurred, And then we look at what's 180 degrees opposite that impact, and that's called the contra coup, or like opposite the coup. And that injury pattern helps us determine whether a person was just having a fixed head and somebody hit it, or whether the head was just standing and went down to the ground. The coup contra coup of a falling or being pushed backward has injury patterns where the impact occurred, but then there's also injury patterns 180 degrees opposite from that. And that happens because the brain is floating in cerebral spinal fluid, and when the head comes down, the brain is a little bit behind, so you get the bang on the back of the head, but then because the brain is floating, it hits the inside of the opposite side of the head. And so that makes the contra coup pattern, and that tells us that there's been a fall backwards and hitting the head.
Is that consistent, a coup contra, just in general, a coup contra coup injury, consistent with a linear acceleration of the head by a fall, an unbroken fall straight back?
Correct. There's also some angular force in that as well.
Understood. In order to determine whether or not Mr. O'Keefe suffered from a coup contra coup injury, can that be done by a gross examination, or does it have to be surgical?
We would look at, well, first we look at the outside, but then we have to look at injuries to the scalp, and we look at the skull, see where the skull fractures are, and in particular to look at the brain and see where the damage is to the brain. And there should, in a fall backwards, you have damage to the brain at the site of impact, but you also have damage to the brain 180 degrees opposite from that, and that tells you it's a fall backwards.
In the case before us, dealing with John O'Keefe, were you able to look at the scalp and the injuries associated with the scalp from a gross perspective?
Yes.
Were you also able to look at the skull and possible fractures that Mr. O'Keefe suffered on his skull?
Yes.
And what about the brain? Did you have evidence of a dissection such that you could see the brain and determine whether or not there was a coup contra coup injury associated with the brain?
Yes, I had a full examination of the brain available.
Were Mr. O'Keefe's head injuries consistent with a coup contra coup injury?
Yes.
Could you describe that, specifically his head injuries, to the jurors, please?
Well, as we say, he has a pattern head injury on the back of his scalp, where there is a tearing of the scalp, and then vertically above that, there is some little areas of scraping to the skin. So that tells me that Mr. O'Keefe went backwards onto something that had a little ridge, but it also had some irregularity to it to cause the different scrapes before you get to the tearing of the scalp. Then when we look at the skull, he had massive skull fractures that started in the back of his head. They came around to the front. They went under the base of his brain, under the skull, under the base of the brain, and it came into the front of the skull at the orbital plates and fractured that, and that caused some bleeding in his upper eyelids. When the brain was examined inside the brain, I could see that the brain had become swollen and parts of it had herniated or moved down the area where the spinal cord is, and that's called brainstem herniation, and that is why the brain stops functioning and why your body stops functioning when you have a severe head injury.
You indicated that the wound pattern suggested a ridge or ledged surface.
Yes.
Could you explain that in more detail, please?
Yes. So if I were looking at it, I would see the break in the scalp. Then I would see several sort of irregularly placed scrapes of the skin that kind of look like pencil marks. And so that means that something with granularity he hit first, then it moved up a little, broke the scalp, and then moved on a little bit above that.
Would you expect to see that if Mr. O'Keefe had fallen backward onto a perfectly flat surface?
No, it has to be a surface that has some small ridges in it to make those little vertical patterns.
Dr. Laposata, what is ecchymosis?
Ecchymosis is a medical term for bruise.
Did you see any ecchymosis on Mr. O'Keefe that he suffered as a result of the coup contre coup injury to the back of his head?
He had a bruise on his brain at the back of the brain and at the front of the brain.
What would the outer let me rephrase that. What would you see around his eyes regarding ecchymosis?
Yes, when you have, when the brain it slaps forcefully against the base of the skull, the delicate bones above the eye break, and that's again the coup contre coup, where the brain slaps forward, and when those delicate bones are broken, there's bleeding, and that bleeding then goes right down into the upper eyelids, so it kind of looks like you have black eyes, but there's not been any punch to the face. It's only come from the skull fracture. That's sometimes called raccoon eyes, because you look like a little raccoon.
Did you see any skin injury to either one of Mr. O'Keefe's upper eyelids?
Yes, he had a small kind of slit-like defect horizontal on his right upper eyelid.
Would the ecchymosis on its own produce that type of injury, that laceration over his right eye?
No, the blood seeping down into his upper eyelids was from the skull fractures.
Was the laceration above his eyelid on the right side a separate injury altogether?
Yes, it was.
Based on your training experience, do you have an opinion as to whether or not what that eyelid laceration might be consistent with?
Some application of force which broke the skin.
Could that be from an object?
Possible.
Could it be from a fist?
Possible.
Sustained us to the floor, Mr. Jackson.
Give me some possibilities of what might cause that laceration above his right eyelid.
So it's not possibilities.
Give me, in your opinion, what you believe could have caused or produced the injury to the upper right eyelid.
So I'm going to see your sidebar here.
And Doctor, I'll remind you, you're still under oath. Thank you.
Thank you. I will.
Good morning, Doctor.
Morning, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Jackson, go right ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Dr. Laposata. Nice to see you again.
Good morning. Glad to be here.
Yesterday, when we last left off, we were talking about a small injury to the upper eyelid of Mr. O'Keefe. Do you recall that?
I do.
Could we have Exhibit 165 with the court's permission, please?
Okay.
I'd like you to take a look at a specific area. If I could. There we go. Right here on this exhibit. Do you see that area?
Yes, I do.
Tell us what that is.
And that is a horizontal splitting of the skin, which was caused by application of force that overcame the tissue's resistance, so the tissue split. And behind that, we see the raccoon-eyed discoloration of the eyelid from the basilar skull fractures.
Can we have Exhibit 13, please? I want to draw your attention to this area of the vehicle. First of all, do you recognize this photograph?
Yes, I do.
How do you recognize that photograph?
I recognize it from looking at it in my materials reviewed, that it's the rear of Miss Reed's SUV.
Taking a look at the area that I'm highlighting, right about there.
Yes.
Could we zoom in on that area? Do you see that overhang over the window?
Yes, I do.
If I use the word spoiler, would you understand what I'm talking about? Call that a
Yes,
spoiler?
yes, I do.
Is the laceration to Mr. O'Keefe's upper eyelid that we just looked at, is that consistent in your opinion with a strike from that area of the vehicle if that vehicle were traveling in reverse at, say, 20 plus miles per hour?
No, that rounded, thick area would not cause that skin defect in his upper eyelid.
If, in fact, a person were hit at, say, 20 plus miles an hour in the face with that rounded edge, what kind of what kind of injury would you expect to see on that person's face?
I would expect to see a ribbon of bruise that would correspond to the height of that spoiler, and it would go across the eyeball, it would hit the nose. So I would expect to see some horizontal ribbon of bruise.
Did you see anything consistent with that, with Mr. O'Keefe's injuries?
No, nothing.
Thank you. We can take that down. We talked yesterday about this phenomenon known as coup contra coup injury to the brain, correct?
Yes.
What happens to the brain after a coup contra coup, a significant coup contra coup injury?
Yes, this was quite a severe brain injury. Was injured on the back of the brain and also the front of the brain. The falling back and impacting the back of the head made the skull fracture radiate along the base of the brain on the right and left sides. It also radiated around on the side of the skull, and that indicates a tremendous transfer of force and energy to the skull and then to the brain, and the brain is rattled around, therefore, within the cerebral spinal fluid in the skull. So what that does is that it breaks the connections between the neurons in the brain and causes small little hemorrhages, and it causes the brain to swell. So when you get an injury, like if you get an injury on your arm, it starts to swell. The same thing happens when that injury energy is applied to the brain. The brain starts to swell. And unfortunately, the brain, when it swells, it doesn't have anywhere to go because it's encased in the skull. So what happens is that the brain and the brain stem under the brain starts to go down the opening in the base of the skull where your spinal cord goes. And that is a harbinger of death, because that means that the brain stem is getting pushed down in this hole in the skull and compressing the areas in the brain stem which control the heartbeat and breathing, and that's called brainstem herniation, and that you just die after that. So that's what happened to Mr. O'Keefe's brain.
Your Honor, I have a document that I'd like to approach with.
Okay.
Yes.
Doctor, can you take a look at that document that I just handed you and tell me if you recognize it?
Yes, I recognize this.
How do you recognize that document?
From looking at the autopsy photos of Mr. O'Keefe's brain.
And what portion of the brain are you looking at?
This shows a photograph looking up under the brain, and it shows a cross section of the brainstem that went down in the hole in the base of the skull, and we see there's hemorrhage in it, and those have a special name. They're called Duret hemorrhages.
How do you spell that?
D-U-R-E-T with a little. There's a little accent somewhere there.
Caret over the E?
Yes. And this shows that the brainstem is going down into the hole where the spinal cord goes. It's stretching the blood vessels and causes little hemorrhage and compresses the neurons in the brainstem, which control your heart rate and your respiration. It's called brainstem herniation, and that's a harbinger of immediate death.
Your Honor, with that, I would ask for the admission of the next, that document is next in order, subject to the appropriate redactions.
Okay. So we'll take that into evidence.
May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, with the redaction, may I present the...
Not yet. 1 minute. Jurors, I told you before that there were photographs that have been introduced into evidence that aren't pleasant. And you may find that these photographs are graphic. And I'm instructing you again that your verdict must not in any way be influenced by the fact that these photographs, you'll see some more today, I believe, that have already been introduced into evidence. So your verdict must not in any way be influenced by the fact that these photographs may be unpleasant or graphic. The defendant's entitled to a verdict based solely on the evidence and not one based on pity or sympathy for the deceased, which might be occasioned by the photographs. Importantly, consider the photographs only as they may draw your attention to a clinical medical status or to the nature of Mr. O'Keefe's injuries themselves. So again, these will be presented to you in the deliberation room in an envelope. But today you'll see some on the screen, and I just wanted you to know that before you see it. So now you can display it.
Your Honor, may I approach very briefly?
Yes.
If you wouldn't mind taking a look at that document.
Oh,
is that
yes.
a redacted version or a closer-up version of just the brainstem?
Yes, this photograph shows the cross-section going this way of the brainstem with the hemorrhages caused by the brainstem going down into the foramen magnum.
With that, Your Honor, actually, I think with the court's permission, I would trade that as the next in order rather than the unredacted version.
All right. Is there any objection to switching the exhibits like that?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, and the arrows point to that on there.
So this is going to be the next exhibit?
That'll be it.
Exhibit 225, Mark.
Thank you. The other one will be for identification, the first one.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And that'll be FFF for ID. Number F.
Okay, you can display it now.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Walt? Do you see what's displayed on the screen above your head?
Yes.
What is that?
Excuse me, that's a cross-section across the brainstem of Mr. O'Keefe, and it shows where the blue arrows I've put in there show the red areas, which are areas of bleeding, which is the sign of brainstem herniation. All the background is white material, and that's part of the appearance of neurons in the brain. So that shows that the brainstem because of the brain swelling, pushed it down into the hole in the base of the skull where the spinal cord goes, and it pulls on the blood vessels, causing the blood vessels to break and the blood vessels to bleed, and that shows you that the brainstem has been compressed and damaged, causing death.
May I approach?
Yes.
I'm holding a green laser pointer.
Oh, thank
You
you.
use the display to your right, so the viewers can better see it. Could you point to the areas with that laser pointer of the bleeding that you indicated causes the swelling?
Okay, so, okay. Is that going on the...
It is. It's probably
thank
hard for you to see.
Oh, that's okay. So this sort of roundish thing is the brainstem, and the arrows are pointing to the red areas. So there's a blood vessel that's broken there because it's been torn and pulled, with surrounding blood going into the neuronal tissue here and over here and over here. And also some of this is also bleeding, with the blood looking brown because the brain was placed in formaldehyde. So all this brown area, the red area, should not be there.
Is this type of herniation life-threatening?
It causes death. Yes, it is life-threatening.
How quickly, we can take that down. How quickly, doctor, would you expect that this could cause, let's first talk about incapacitation.
Yes.
How quickly would someone be incapacitated after they suffer a coup contra coup injury of this magnitude with the concomitant injuries that you see in the brainstem?
Well, there would be two parts to what that injury would cause the body to do. First, there would be immediate unconsciousness because of the transfer of all the energy to the brain and the massive skull fractures. So that, so that would disrupt the normal function of the brain and produce immediate unconsciousness. Then the brain would start to swell, and within 15, 20 minutes or so, then that brainstem starts to go down the opening in the bottom of the skull, and then the blood vessels are broken, the brainstem gets compressed, and the centers in that brainstem which control the heart and the respiration then stop. So you go unconscious, brain swells, then you die.
Turning to the actual, your review of the actual brain, in this instance, Mr. O'Keefe's injuries specifically, did you reach any conclusion or opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty about his incapacitation, the length of time it would take for him to become first incapacitated and ultimately to be rendered dead?
He would be immediately incapacitated with a decreased level of consciousness. Once he received that impact on the back of the head, he would not be able to make any purposeful movements. There might be some arm jerking or some seizure activity, but he would not be able to carry. He wouldn't be able to get up. He wouldn't be able to walk. He wouldn't be able to do any purposeful activity. He would be severely concussed, unconscious, not able to walk, not able to carry out purposeful activity. And then as the brain continues swelling and that brainstem gets compressed, then the heartbeat is disrupted, the breathing is disrupted, and then those heart and breathing stop. And within 15 or 20 minutes, then he could be dead.
Is that opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty?
Yes, it is.
You testified concerning wound pattern recognition pretty extensively during the course of your giving your qualifications. What is a patterned injury?
A patterned injury is very basic to the training in forensic pathology and medicine because it helps us understand some change on the body, some pattern injury that corresponds to the object that made it. So we can look at an injury and say, we can figure out what made that. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. But a pattern injury is very important for a forensic pathologist to recognize, because it's going to really help the police investigation. Because I can say, oh, this looks like it's a wound from scissors. This looks like it's a wound from a screwdriver stab. So by identifying the pattern that object makes on the body, I can help the death investigation by helping the police say, look for some screwdriver, look for some hammer. So looking at that, identifying a pattern injury is really important it's basic to the forensic pathologist's knowledge base, and then also very important to the investigation of the crime or incident.
I'd like you to look at another photograph, an exhibit that's already been put into evidence. 160, please, with the court's permission.
Yes, jurors, this may be one of the photographs as well. Right. Or there'll be a series.
Dr. Laposata, I want to draw your attention to the center of this photograph.
Yes.
First of all, do you recognize what's depicted here?
Yes, I do.
How do you recognize?
I recognize it from reviewing the autopsy photographs of Mr. O'Keefe.
You reviewed it, informing your opinions and conclusions?
Yes.
Can you describe what's depicted in this photograph? What are we looking at?
Yes. So we're looking at the back of Mr. O'Keefe's head and an injury caused by the angular acceleration going down and hitting his head in the back. And then this is also a pattern injury. So what we see is the horizontal tear of the scalp, and we can see it's undermined a little bit. So that means the direction is going from bottom to top. Also, we see these sort of vertical lines in here and down below. So what that tells me is that the back of his head hit something that had a fine granular pattern to it to cause those individual little marks, and then also something that had a linear or ridged pattern that he went back on that broke the scalp there. So we have two parts really to this pattern injury. We have the horizontal tear of the scalp made by impact with some sort of ridged surface. And then we have these vertical scraping of the skin above and also below. They're obscured a little bit by the ruler there, which says that whatever he hit had some little like granularity to it, with each little sort of granule making those vertical marks, and then the ridged pattern having the major point of impact.
What is the significance of the pattern when you say ridged pattern? And there's two things we're looking at: the laceration or the abrasion versus the defect above and below that laceration.
Yeah. So what this injury tells me, or what I would tell the investigators, is that Mr. O'Keefe went back onto some object that had some sort of ridge to it to make that horizontal tear in the skin, but that ridge also it wasn't smooth. It had some little grainy grainy things sticking up on it that would make each of these little things. And then it's the job of the police then to go back to the scene and look around for something which might fit that pattern.
We can take that down. Did you, in furtherance of your investigation, coming to your opinions and conclusions, look at the area of 34 Fairview?
The outside, yes.
Meaning photographs?
Yes.
Did you also see photographs of any significance to you related to the garage, the interior of the garage?
Sustained. Jurors, disregard that comment, that question.
What part of the area did you see? What part of the location did you see?
Excuse me. I saw all the scene photographs taken by the police, which showed the front yard in the area where Mr. O'Keefe was found. I also saw some photographs of the inside of the house and the inside of...
So I'm going to stop you there, Dr. Laposata. Jurors, I'm striking anything after what the pictures from outside, Mr. Jackson. Move on.
Let's stay with the outside of the home. Did
Yes.
you see the front lawn area?
Yes, I did.
How did you? What did you note about the front lawn area?
Well, I was looking at the area where Mr. O'Keefe's body was found, because we know once he came back and slammed his head, he's not going to get up and move around.
So, yes, I'm going to strike the second part of that. Just answer the question specifically.
Okay, I'll try, Your Honor. Thank you.
Why were you interested in the outside area where his body was found?
Because then I could identify an object possibly there that would have caused the injury on the back of his head.
Did you see any such object in any of the photos that you reviewed?
No, there was nothing there. It was a flat grass surface.
Would the flat grass, let's assume that the grass was very cold and very hard, the dirt was very cold and very hard, would falling backward onto that dirt, hard or not, would that cause the patterned injury that you see, that we just saw in Exhibit 160?
No.
Why do you say that?
Because if you fall back on a flat surface, you get many times the tear you get in the scalp can be more like a star, because you've just hit one part and then the tears go in kind of a star pattern. And also because you would not have those discrete vertical scraping of the skin. You would tend to, if you fell back on grass, you might see grass in the wound, or you would tend to see an irregular kind of crisscross pattern of the flattened grass. And that's not what we have here on Mr. O'Keefe.
Do you have any training or experience in diagnosing hypothermia in individuals?
Oh, yes.
Have you conducted autopsies of individuals who have suffered from or died from hypothermia?
Yes, many.
How many?
100 or more, and then I've supervised my assistants who've also diagnosed the same death from decrease in body temperature.
Have you ever engaged in any death investigation, aside from the actual autopsies, death investigations in which the cause of death was deemed to be hypothermia?
Yes,
How many times would you say you've undertaken that type of investigation?
at least 100.
Have you ever reviewed any peer-reviewed medical literature associated with or discussing hypothermia and something known as Wisniewski spots?
Yes, that's in the medical literature and also in our forensic textbooks.
Did you review the medical examiner's file, Dr. Scortibello's file, as it related to, in connection with this case, you reviewed the entire file, correct?
I did.
Did you conduct a differential diagnosis as it relates to the potential for hypothermia?
Yes, I did.
Describe, before we get into your findings or your conclusions and opinions, what is inferential thinking?
Inferential thinking is another name for making a differential diagnosis. In other words, seeing a finding and then saying, how many ways can I get that finding? And then go and investigate each one of those ways and either rule them in or rule them out as being responsible to causing that finding.
Did you note whether or not the medical examiner, Dr. Scortibello, mentioned hypothermia as a potential cause of death in this case?
She did put that on the death certificate.
Along with something else?
Along with the blunt force head injury.
Do you agree with or concur with the blunt force head injury as a cause of death?
Yes, Mr. O'Keefe died from the blunt force head injury.
Do you concur with the diagnosis of hypothermia?
No, the body did not have any hypothermia.
What led you to that conclusion?
Mm-hmm. Well, when you have we know that normal body temperature is around 98, and we know that then at the hospital that Mr. O'Keefe's rectal temperature was around 80. So we know that his temperature went down. So there are two ways the body temperature can get down. It can get down while you're alive, or a dead body also cools when it's in a cold environment. So those are the two things you have to look at.
I'd like you to take a look. I'm
Show
sorry,
Mr.
Mayor
Remington.
Coach.
Yep, show Mr. Remington.
Thank you. I apologize.
Yes.
Do you recognize what's depicted in that photograph?
Yes, I do.
What is that?
This is a photograph I took from our forensic medical literature, and it shows the lining of the stomach. So the stomach is opened up, and we look at the lining of the stomach, and it shows a characteristic pattern of small ulcerations throughout the stomach, which are called medically Wisniewski's ulcers, and that allows a forensic pathologist to diagnose death from being exposed to a cold environment or death due to hypothermia. And they're caused by, as the body gets colder and colder when it's alive, the small blood vessels in the lining of the stomach, they start to break, and then they're in the acidic environment of the stomach, and you get tiny little ulcers which then look like small dots. And that is how at post-mortem examination or autopsy, it's one of the findings I look for to see if a person died from hypothermia.
Doctor, what is gastric mucosa as it relates to the stomach lining?
The gastric mucosa, when you open up the stomach and you look at the inside, the first cells lining that inside is called the mucosa.
Is that what we're looking at in this photograph or no?
Yes, we're looking at the mucosa with ulcerations, which are little craters that form in it due to hypothermia.
Is that exemplar of what Wisniewski spots looks like as it relates to hypothermia from a book that is, or literature that is peer-reviewed?
Oh, yes.
Is it widely accepted in the medical field?
Yes, it is.
And is it referenced by forensic pathologists and used in teaching?
Yes.
Your Honor, I would move for the admission of that photograph.
Okay.
Exhibit 226.
Permission to display, Your Honor?
Yes.
Is this a fair representation of what you were just looking at?
Yes.
Describe what we're looking at.
Okay, so this, I took this photograph from our forensic medical literature, and this was from a person who died due to exposure to a cold environment. And this is the stomach has been opened, and we're looking at the inside of the stomach. And the normal appearance is kind of pinky white. That's how it should look like. And what's abnormal here is all these black dots, which are the Wisniewski's ulcers, which are diagnostic of death due to exposure to the cold. So these areas are little tiny craters, and they fill up with blood. And we see that in over 90% of the cases of people who die from exposure to the cold.
Doctor, did you also look at Mr. O'Keefe's stomach lining?
Yes, I did.
If we could have, with the court's permission, Exhibit 164 put up as well.
Okay.
Do you see the photograph on the right?
Yes.
What is that of?
This is the Mr. O'Keefe's stomach, which has been opened up, and we're looking at the inside. We see that the mucosa is a little bit red, and there's a little bit of increased blood flow here. And this is the normal pattern of the inside of the stomach. It's kind of ridged. That's called rugae. That's the normal folds inside the stomach. But there's no ulcerations here. So the diagnosis of death due to hypothermia is not appropriate in his case.
Did you see, or do you see, any classic Wisniewski spots in Mr. O'Keefe's stomach lining or gastric mucosa?
No, no.
Do you observe any ulcers specific to Mr. O'Keefe's stomach lining?
No, there are no ulcers. It's a normal appearance of what we would call a gross specimen. When you open the stomach at autopsy, you can see some redness of the normal lining of the stomach.
Did you, let me ask this first, do you have an opinion as to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty based on the totality of your review and examination of the autopsy and its associated file, an opinion as to whether or not Mr. O'Keefe died of hypothermia or complications related to hypothermia?
I do have an opinion.
And what is that opinion?
He did not die of hypothermia.
And is that opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty?
Yes.
Taking a look at the darker red areas in the stomach lining of Mr. O'Keefe on the photograph to the right,
Yes.
that's Exhibit 164, can you describe what those are? What are those darker areas?
Well, here we see a little bit of bleeding. The darker areas are the areas of the lining that are at the bottom of the normal rugae, because the inside surface of the stomach sort of looks like it's covered with little mountains. And so we can get the redness in between what the rugae in the stomach. And there's a little bit of increased redness here, but no ulceration.
Do you have an opinion, or were you able to form an opinion as to what the increased redness might be or is associated with?
Yes.
Cystine.
Did you note anything of significance in the rest of your examination of the file, the autopsy file, the medical examiner's file, that was related to what you see in the photograph 164?
Yes.
All right, I'm going to see its eyebrow for just a minute here.
We can take that down. May I continue?
Yes.
Thank you. With regard to the, it's my word, not yours, doctor, so forgive me, the defects, the redder marks that you're mentioning on the rugae or in and around the rugae on the gastric mucosa, did you note that there was a machine that was used for life-saving measures as it related to Mr. O'Keefe?
Oh, yes, it caused some damage to the body.
Okay, let's talk about that for just a quick second. What is that machine called?
It's a mechanical device to administer chest compressions, and the company that makes it is called Lucas, or one of the companies, so it's called a Lucas machine, and it can be attached to the body. Your arms go up over a ridge, and there's a plunger, and it goes around your back, and so it just plunges, and it does mechanical resuscitation and chest compression, compressing the chest right over the lower sternum about 2 inches or so, and it's very helpful in a situation where the manual compressions, where the attendants and the ERT people, they get tired continually compressing for a long period of time. So the mechanical device was invented to prevent the EMT fatigue when administering chest compressions.
When you mention the sternum area
Yes.
of the body, are there, you go without saying, are there organs beneath the area that's being compressed by the mechanical Lucas machine?
Oh, absolutely.
What do those organs include?
Well, ideally they include the heart because that's what's supposed to be pumping the blood out, but it's also in a circular area that's right below the sternum, which includes the heart. But what is also under there is the esophagus and the interior of the stomach. So this area is right under where the machine is compressing as well, as long as, in addition to part of the head of the pancreas, which is also right there under the lower sternum. And what can happen with the Lucas machine pushing in for 100 times a minute for a depth of about 2 or 2.5 inches, that these organs right underneath of it get compressed between the Lucas pump and the bony vertebral bodies that's along your back. So you have the Lucas machine compressing these organs, and they're compressing them against the vertebral bodies of your bony vertebral column in the back. So you can get other injuries, organ injuries, that is a complication of the automated mechanical resuscitation. You can get cardiac ruptures, you can get ruptures of the liver, because all those organs are clustered right there, and that machine is pushing those organs in between the pump and the back of the bony spinal column.
Doctor, in your review of the medical records, was there any indication that an automated chest compression machine, a Lucas machine, was used on Mr. O'Keefe?
Yes.
May we can take this down?
Yes.
There's two documents that I'd like to show you. First,
Yes.
that document, and then after you're finished, familiarize yourself. First one and the second one.
Yes.
Taking the first document that addresses the Lucas machine,
Yes.
how do you recognize that photo or those series of photos and graphs?
These are illustrations I put in my report, and one shows a generic patient with the Lucas machine in place around him to do the chest compressions. Then I have a photograph of the actual apparatus of the Lucas machine itself. Then I show what's recognized as medical complications and injury from that machine. It shows, I have an example of a CAT scan of a section through the body horizontally, right where the plunger goes into the chest. And it shows in another patient hemorrhage around the pancreas and around the top of the stomach. Then I have a diagram also taken from our medical literature that shows the direction of force that compresses those organs between the resuscitation paddle and the vertebral body and the backbone.
Doctor, are those photographs and graphs taken from peer-reviewed literature in the medical field that's normally relied on by other medical professionals?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd move for the admission of that first document.
Right, subject to redaction?
I don't think so. I think that that one is not objected to.
Okay. All right, so would you hand that to...
Sure, thank you.
Exhibit 227.
Permission to display, Your Honor?
Yes.
Doctor, I know that's a little bit small and far away. We'll enlarge it as you need.
Okay.
It's not an eye test. Can you tell me what we're looking at? Yeah, let's take the top half of the document. What is that to the left, and then what's the machine in the
Okay,
middle.
so what you see on the left is a anonymous patient showing how the Lucas machine is placed onto the patient, where the arms are pulled up and clasped against these rigid mechanical bridges, and then here is the engine which puts the pump, and that's the pump which just goes up and down to do the chest compressions. And so that's how it's affixed to a patient.
To be clear, doctor, that is not Mr. O'Keefe. That is
No, this is
Could be a model.
an unknown person.
Okay. And then what are we looking at in terms of the actual machine to the
Yeah,
right?
this shows the actual machine before it's put on a patient. You can see how it encircles the patient, and then there is this circular pump, which is the compressor pump.
If we can look at what is that a picture of, the highlighted portion?
That's the circular part that actually is projected down onto the body.
That makes contact with the chest?
Correct, and it has a spring in there that the engine above it gives a certain number of compressions per minute.
And you said on average the compressions per minute would be about what?
Now, they should be around 100.
Okay. If we could go to the bottom half of the page, or the graphics on the bottom. What are we looking at in this photograph?
And we're looking at, on the left side, we're looking at a CAT scan, which scans a person who's had some injury from the Lucas compression machine, and it's sorts a cross section. So the arrow here is pointing to the head of the pancreas and the area of the esophagus, and then the machine would compress down onto that. And the important part is that I don't know if that's working on there. The little thing that looks like at the very bottom, that's circular and then has a little, looks like a little steer head, that's the vertebral column, and that's bone. And so the pump is pushing in that area where the arrow is pushing those organs against the bony vertebral column. Excuse me. And that's on an actual patient that had that. Then on the right, it shows the schematic of the blue arrows indicating the force coming down. Then we see the organs, and the red arrows show how the pancreas can get hemorrhage, and also some of the esophagus that goes into the top part of the stomach. And we see that's, I can't really see where that, I think it stopped.
Oh. May I approach you?
Yes.
Oh, no, you've got it. Okay.
Maybe a battery issue.
Okay. And then we see at the bottom with those three little things projecting from it, that is the vertebral body, which is made up of bone. So you can see how the chest compressions, not only hoping to save the life by keeping the heart blood functioning, can also cause some injuries and damage, not life-threatening usually, to the other organs there.
We can take that down. Doctor, taking a look at the second document that's in front of you, do you recognize what's depicted in that document?
Yes.
What is that?
This is a picture of Mr. O'Keefe, his chest, while he's at the hospital, which shows a lot of the resuscitation equipment.
Is that a true and accurate depiction of Mr. O'Keefe at the hospital based on your review of the medical file?
Yes.
I'll move for the admission of that.
Okay.
Oh.
Exhibit 228.
Then,
Permission to display briefly.
okay.
Taking a look at the photographs to the left and to the right, do you see any indication on Mr. O'Keefe's body that is suggestive that the Lucas machine, where the Lucas machine was situated?
Yes, as I pointed out here with the blue arrows, that big circular mark there is the mark on the skin where the compression pump compressed the chest of Mr. O'Keefe, and it caused some rib fractures, and it also caused those reddening of the stomach and some hemorrhage in the pancreas.
We can take that down. Doctor, based on your review of the medical records, did you calculate the approximate number of compressions that Mr. O'Keefe would have been subject to based on that Lucas machine?
Yes.
What is that calculation?
His body was found around 6 in the morning, and he got to the hospital around 6:37, I think. So if they put the Lucas machine on him when they got him into the ambulance, and it's compressing at 100 times a minute, and that is from the time of the body being discovered to the time at the hospital, that's around 37 minutes. So if you multiply 37 minutes times 100 compressions a minute, that's around over 30,000 compressions that would have been done to Mr. O'Keefe's body in the course of his resuscitation efforts.
Doctor, do you have an opinion as to what caused the hemorrhaging that we saw on Mr. O'Keefe's stomach lining?
Yes.
What is that opinion?
It was from the blunt compression of the Lucas machine.
Is that opinion to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty?
Yes.
You indicated earlier that there is a difference between someone dying of hypothermia or complications associated with hypothermia and a body that's already passed away just cooling, correct?
Correct.
Do you have an opinion as to a reasonable degree of medical certainty as to whether Mr. O'Keefe suffered from hypothermia?
I do have an opinion.
What is that opinion?
He did not experience hypothermia.
Did you observe any signs of frostbite?
No.
Did that have any weight concerning your opinion, overall opinion, as to whether or not Mr. O'Keefe died with complications associated with hypothermia?
Well, if someone dies due to exposure to low temperatures, you expect to see not only the Wisniewski's ulcers, but you expect to see some frostbite changes in the extremities.
Based on your overall review of the medical records associated with Mr. O'Keefe, were you able to reach an opinion and conclusion as to the cause of death of Mr. O'Keefe?
Yes.
What is that opinion?
He died of brain injuries and skull fractures due to blunt force trauma of the head.
Do you hold that opinion for Mr. O'Keefe's cause of death to a reasonable degree of medical certainty?
Yes.
I want to shift gears for a minute, Dr. Laposata, and talk about patterned injuries elsewhere on Mr. O'Keefe's body. You've obviously talked about your training and experience as it relates to recognition of patterned wounds, correct?
Correct.
That's something that you were trained in when you were training, correct?
Yes, it's very basic to the discipline of forensic pathology.
And have you also trained others during the course of your 40-year career on the issue of wound pattern recognition?
Yes.
You've taught courses and given lectures, is that right?
Yes, I have.
I'd like to show you Exhibit 167 with the court's permission.
Okay.
Do you recognize what's depicted in this photograph?
Yes.
How do you recognize it?
Is a photograph of the right arm of Mr. O'Keefe.
Did you review and consider this photograph and others in coming or forming your opinions, coming to your conclusions and opinions in this case?
Yes.
In order to come to your ultimate opinion and conclusion, or opinions and conclusions in this case, is it important to take all of the injuries that a decedent may have suffered into account rather than one or two piecemeal?
Now, you have to look at the whole picture to understand what happened to the body.
Why is that? What's the importance of that? It may be obvious, but explain that for the jurors, please.
Well, when you're looking at changes and injuries to the body and trying to understand what happened to the body, there are different patterns of injuries on different parts of the body. And by trying to separate those and understand what patterns were caused by certain things, then you're able to put together a sequence of events that happened to the body prior to death.
What role do photographs play in a forensic medical examiner reviewing the medical evidence and coming to opinions and conclusions? How important are photographs?
Oh, those are huge. It's standard practice to always document at the postmortem examination important findings with photography.
Were the photos in Mr. O'Keefe's case useful in coming to opinions and conclusions concerning his injuries altogether?
Yes.
What about the injuries to his right arm?
Yes, those photographs are very important to understand those injuries.
Do you believe that there is a patterned injury on Mr. O'Keefe's right arm?
Yes, there is a pattern injury there.
Have you ever seen, in your experience, either being taught or teaching, patterned injuries as they relate to animal wounds, generally?
Oh, absolutely. Very common.
Do animal wounds include both claws and teeth, dentin?
Yes.
So bite marks and claw marks might be two different types of patterned wounds that you may see in your evaluation, just
Correct.
in general?
Correct, because when an animal approaches the body, there may be damage from the claws and also from the mouth.
Do you expect to see punctate wounds as well as linear abrasions?
Yes.
Do you expect to see certain bite patterns as well?
Yes.
What types of injuries, let's talk about animals in general, what types of injuries do animals produce on the skin of human beings?
Well, animals can produce, if you're talking about, mammals, they can produce injuries from their claws, where you get parallel scrapes of the skin from the claws applied to the skin, or you can see a pattern from the jaw configuration of the animal. And most animals that attack or get in contact with the body have canines, so there's two canines on either side that make paired marks, and that would be called a pattern injury. So it makes parallel sort of gouges, and as the canines move in a horizontal pattern or a vertical pattern, the space between them can change. The other thing you see in an animal bite is you see not only the canines that come out, but depending on how the jaw is applied to the body, you can have little dot-like imprints in sort of a U-shaped pattern, which are from the incisors, the little incisors of the animal. So you look for punctures, you look for paired gouges, which would be the canines, and then you look for arced patterns of little dots, which can be the application of the incisors of an animal bite.
What is an incised wound?
An incised wound is a wound due to cutting from a sharp object.
Would you expect to see incised wounds from an animal bite or claw marks?
No, they don't cause, they're not like knife wounds. They cause more of a scraping injury.
Do you see the injuries that you're looking at in Exhibit 167, are these more consistent with incised wounds or the scraping abrasions that you just talked about?
Sustained.
Were you able to determine from your review of the medical records whether the injuries that you see on Mr. O'Keefe's right arm were pre-mortem or post-mortem?
They were, oh yes, I can determine that. They were inflicted prior to death.
Do you have an opinion as to whether or not the wounds that you see, the patterned injury that you see on Mr. O'Keefe's right arm, is consistent with an animal bite or claw marks?
Yes, it is, very much.
Thank you. We can take that down. May I have just a moment, Your Honor? Actually, Your Honor, may we approach very briefly?
Okay.
May I inquire?
Yes.
You indicated that, in your opinion, the wounds to Mr. O'Keefe's arms were pre-mortem, not post-mortem. His right arm, I should say, were pre-mortem, not post-mortem, correct?
Correct.
What's the basis for that opinion?
Well, a forensic pathologist has to be able to differentiate changes that happen to the body while the person is alive versus things that happen after the person is dead. For instance, there is something called post-mortem predation, where if the body is out in the woods and dead, then wolves and such can come and make, quote, injuries to the body. But we're able to tell from our training and experience that those were made after death. The usual way we tell is that when it's made during life, the blood vessels that are damaged, the heart's pumping blood through, so you can see a reddish color and maybe some blood around it. Whereas if the body is damaged after death, the changes to that body and those, quote, injuries look more yellowish and kind of brown because the blood is not flowing. So that's how you can tell if something done to the body is while the body was alive or whether it was done after death.
Do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty that the wounds on Mr. O'Keefe's right arm were pre-mortem?
Yes, they were done while he was alive and bleeding.
You talked about death investigations. As a matter of fact, you mentioned something about what a forensic pathologist's role is in a death investigation to potentially send investigators back out to answer certain questions, correct?
Yes.
Did you see any evidence in the medical records or the medical examiner's complete records that any effort was made to send investigators to the location to see if there were any animals at the location at or around the time of John O'Keefe's death?
Objection.
Sustained.
Do you believe it's important? Well, let me ask it a different way. Would following up with investigators be an important part of any forensic pathology investigation?
No, absolutely. You're working as a team to figure out what happened to the body.
Thank you. we talked about the theme and theory of differential diagnosis, correct?
Yes.
How does engaging in the process of differential diagnoses avoid bias in an investigation?
By after you have your findings and you sit back and think, well, how many ways could I get this finding? And so bias sometimes means, oh, I think it's this, and then you just stop. So that's a sort of a bias where you make a decision too quickly and you don't then stop to consider what other things could cause this same finding. So you have to consider not only what immediately comes to mind, but then you think, how else could we get this pattern of injuries?
Did you engage in a differential diagnosis as it relates to this case?
Yes.
Did you consider whether the injuries could have been caused by a motor vehicle accident?
I did consider that.
Did you consider whether Mr. O'Keefe's right arm injuries specifically could have been caused by being hit by a motor vehicle?
Yes, I did think about that.
Were you able to rule that out?
Absolutely.
So the objection sustained, jurors strike that answer.
Tell me about, well, let me ask it this way. Did you come to an opinion or conclusion as to whether or not Mr. O'Keefe's injuries as a whole were produced by a motor vehicle pedestrian incident?
Sustained.
You indicated that you've done thousands of autopsies yourself, correct?
Yes,
And you've supervised many times more that.
correct.
How many of those autopsies that you've performed or supervised have involved motor vehicle incidents?
Now, hundreds.
How many of those hundreds have involved motor vehicle pedestrian incidents?
Almost as many.
Have you performed autopsies specifically on individuals known to be hit by vehicles?
Yes.
Have you performed autopsies on individuals believed to be hit by vehicles?
Yes.
Have you engaged in differential diagnosis and inferential thinking in terms of developing an opinion or conclusion to a medical certainty about whether or not the injuries that you see on a decedent are consistent or inconsistent with a motor vehicle pedestrian incident?
Yes, that's part of what we figure out as a forensic pathologist.
Did you do that in this case?
Yes, I.
Sustained.
What are some of the injuries that you would expect generally to exist if a pedestrian is hit by a motor vehicle at speed? Not 1-2 miles an hour, let's say 20 plus miles an hour.
Yes, one of the things you see is a pedestrian is, standing upright and is impacted by this blunt object of a automobile or a van or a SUV. And what you see first most is the tissue is crushed where the projections of the vehicle impact the tissue. And when you crush the tissue, that gives you a bruise. So that's the first part of the pattern of impact. It crushes the tissue, it gives you a bruise because it breaks the blood vessels underneath the skin. And then depending on how much more force is applied, the skin can break.
So I'm going to strike that. Next question, Mr. Jackson.
In addition to bruising, what else might you expect to find in an individual who's been struck by a vehicle at speed?
So let's come over to sidebar.
May I inquire?
Yes.
I forgot where I left off, so I'm just going to pick up.
Okay.
As best my memory can serve me. It has been suggested that Mr. O'Keefe's right arm, Doctor, was injured by contact with the right rear taillight of Miss Reed's 2021 Lexus LX570.
Objection.
No, I'm allowing that in.
Thank you. As Mr. O'Keefe, it was struck as Mr. O'Keefe was standing and the Lexus backed into him. That was a postulate put forward. I want to find out from you, do you agree with that?
Well, that's something to think about.
So,
Oh, I'm sorry.
yes, I'm going to strike that question and answer.
Let me ask it a different way. Let me ask you a different question. Do Mr. O'Keefe's pattern injuries on his right arm, do they correspond to injuries that could have been produced by irregular fractured plastic pieces impacting his arm?
No, not at all.
Why do you say that?
First of all, those injuries are patterned injuries from an animal bite. We have the canines, we have the incisors.
All right, so I'm going to strike that, and let's see you at sidebar.
May I, Your Honor?
Yes.
In your report, Doctor, you indicated that Mr. O'Keefe's patterned injuries on his right arm do not correspond to injuries that could have been produced by irregular fractured plastic pieces impacting his arm. Do you recall putting that in your report?
Yes, I
And
wrote that.
Do you stand by that?
Yes, that's my conclusion.
And you also wrote his arm had no tissue bruising from impact injury. Do you remember writing that?
Yes,
Do you stand by that?
I do.
You also wrote, neither did his skin show any array of irregular, unpredictable, randomly scattered cuts and scrapes at various angles and depths. Do you remember writing that?
I did.
And do you stand by that?
I do.
You also wrote that you noted Mr. O'Keefe had no bruising on his arms or torso. Is that right?
Correct.
And you also wrote, in particular, Mr. O'Keefe did not have bruises on his legs, correct?
Yes, correct.
And you indicated that that was shown by dissection of the leg tissue and muscle at autopsy. Is that right?
Yes, there was a special leg dissection done to look for bumper impacts.
Okay. You reviewed the entirety of the medical records associated with the autopsy,
Yes,
including photographs,
taken to the hospital, yes.
okay, and autopsy photographs,
Yes,
and other data and documentation, correct?
yes.
Are x-rays an important part of an autopsy generally?
Oh, yes, usually there are x-rays taken of the body prior to the examination.
What do x-rays show? Why are those important?
They're important because they show foreign material in the body, like a bullet. They also image the skeleton, so we can look for fractures of the bones.
You see any x-rays?
I did.
What were the x-rays of?
The x-rays were taken of Mr. O'Keefe at the medical examiner's office, and they were x-rays of his chest, his arms, and his legs.
Did you specifically review x-rays of his right appendage? Hand, forearm, arm.
Yes, they were included in the x-rays.
Have you seen x-rays before?
Oh, many times.
How many times?
Thousands, probably.
Is part of your job to review x-rays
Oh,
to make
absolutely.
a determination of whether or not they indicate broken bones, fractures, hairline fractures, things of that nature?
Yes, it's part of the medical legal autopsy to study the x-rays of the deceased.
That's done in the ordinary course of being a forensic pathologist, is that right?
Yes,
Are you trained on how to read x-rays?
yes,
You have to be a radiologist to read an x-ray as a medical doctor?
no.
Medical doctors do that all the time, correct?
Yes, it's part of general medical training.
And is it also part of specialized training for forensic pathologists?
It falls under the rubric of general radiology that a doctor knows. There are some specialized areas in forensic where you have to understand, like decompositional changes that you can see on an x-ray that aren't something that you would see in a clinical setting.
Taking the appendage one item at a time, did you look at Mr. O'Keefe's x-rays of Mr. O'Keefe's right hand?
Yes.
Did you see any defect in the bones of the right hand?
No bony defects, and the tissue was normal.
Did you take a look at the x-ray of Mr. O'Keefe's right arm?
Yes.
Did you notice any defects at all in the bones in the right arm?
No, the bones in the right arm were intact.
No breaks,
Correct, no breaks.
fractures, hairline fractures?
No,
Did you look at the upper arm x-ray of Mr. O'Keefe?
yes.
Did you note any defects in the bony structure of Mr. O'Keefe's upper arm?
No, the bones were 100% intact.
No breaks, fractures, hairline fractures?
Correct, none of those.
Was there any indication in your mind, based on your review of those three x-rays, the hand, forearm, the arm, that arm had suffered any kind of bone trauma at all?
Sustained.
Was there any indication, based on your review and your expert opinion, that his arm had been broken, fractured?
No, the bones were intact. No breakage, no fractures.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you.